Well, hi there. Welcome to United, a podcast for change, episode 25. I'm Lori, your host, and tonight we are going to go over just some basics about criminal law, civil law. It's, uh, n- None of this should be construed as legal advice. I do have over 20 years experience as a civil litigation paralegal. However, I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice. Um, just general knowledge that I've picked up along the way and that I wanted to share because in my journeys through social media, uh, especially with regard to the various Trump cases, um, I've noticed where people get things incorrect. And what this episode will not be is crapping on Trump supporters or MAGA. Um, I firmly believe that knowledge is power. And while I am of a different political leanings, my goal here is to hopefully bridge the gap. Um, I don't believe that anyone that likes Trump is dumb or evil, or I don't believe any of those things. We are all good, decent people at our core. Um, but I have noticed where, if something is posted, somebody that supports Trump is, they might say something incorrect. So I just wanted to go over some things so that you guys have this knowledge. Um, where if you see something, maybe it'll make a little more sense. Um, and you can go back with with a valid point. So first, we're going to just start off with just the different um, levels of courts, and some of this will most likely be familiar to people just in general. Um, but there are all different kinds. There are, starting at the municipal court level, onto the county or the state level, onto federal, up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then within the different levels of court, they handle different things. And that comes under what's called venue and jurisdiction. And venue is just the location. So, your local courthouse that's downtown, that's the venue. It's the location of where a case will be heard. Jurisdiction is the power of that a particular court to hear a certain type of case. Um, for example, a bankruptcy case wouldn't be heard in county court or state court. It will be heard in bankruptcy court. A probate case where somebody's passed away and you're handling the estate and the will and all that, that will be heard specifically in either a probate court or a surrogate's court. So there's differences in just where cases are heard. There's also administrative courts, and that you'll see with, administrative law. Department of Environmental Protection is a great example of an administrative court, um, and they handle specifically EPA violations. There are predominantly two types of cases. There are criminal and there's civil. Criminal is some government prosecuting a person or an entity for violating a law, committing a crime. It's it's almost self-explanatory. So if you're looking at a document that's been filed in court, um, for example, the cases brought against Trump in D.C., the case in Florida, the case in New York, the business fraud case, you will see that the plaintiff is the government. DC and Florida, it's the United States of America versus Donald Trump. New York, it's the state of New York. So, that's a good way to tell, um, that there's criminal. There are also civil cases filed by the government. Um, and I'm going to amend myself. New York is actually the business fraud is a civil case. Um, but it is also it's an example of that because it is where it's the state versus Donald Trump and the Trump organization. Um, Criminal cases are it's you've committed a crime against society, against everyone. So that's why it's the government that's pursuing that case. The person leading that case can be an attorney general, a district attorney. Um, but it is because you've committed a crime against society. And the purpose is punishment. And that punishment can be fines. You could lose your liberty by being sentenced to, jail or prison. Could even cost you your life, depending upon the type of case or the type of charge. And with criminal cases, they have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. That does not mean all doubt. You don't have to have, although it's nice, you don't have to have video of someone committing a crime, or an audio recording of someone committing a crime. It can be, there's circumstantial evidence and, but you have to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. What a reasonable person would agree with you. And the process for a criminal case is it usually starts off with an investigation by some law enforcement entity, whether it is, a city detective or FBI, DOJ, any type of law enforcement entity. They gather evidence, and then once there's enough evidence, then there's an arrest, booking, an arraignment, the initial appearance where bail is set, a plea agreement, a plea is entered, and usually you're going to see guilty, not guilty, or it's called nolo contendere, which is Latin for no contest, where a charge has been leveled against you and you're just not going to fight it. But it's criminal. You have to go into court. You have to enter a plea. You're basically treated the same as entering a guilty plea because you're not fighting it. An example of that in the civil sense is the Rudy Giuliani case, where he was sued by Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman. He entered an affidavit of no contest where he wasn't going to argue their claims. So, in a sense, he admitted that everything they were claiming was true. Um, there's also, in criminal cases, there is discovery, there are pretrial motions, then trial, then verdict and sentencing. And DC is criminal. Florida is a criminal case. Georgia is a criminal case. There's also a New York fraud, the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. That is a criminal case. Um, let's see. And then on the other side of that is the civil. Civil is a person or a business suing a person or a business. If you are at someone's house and you fall down their steps and you hurt yourself, you can sue them. That's a civil case. And, um, the purpose of a civil case is to seek a remedy, whether it is money or you want someone to be made to, do something. Uh, your neighbor is blasting loud music at 3 o'clock in the morning, from 3 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock in the morning, every single night. You can't sleep. It's driving you crazy. You've asked them nicely. They won't stop. You've sent the police out. They won't stop. And while the police might go after them for violating a noise ordinance, it's now affecting your health. So now you're going to sue them. And really what you want, like, you maybe want some money for the lost sleep, and you want the court to order them to stop playing their music at 3 o'clock in the morning. So that you want the court to make the person do something. Um, like the New York business fraud case that just concluded, where we're waiting for the order. Judge Letitia James was the, um, prosecuting the case. It's Judge Engeron. They're seeking money, and they're also seeking, and by they I mean the state, is also seeking to have like a permanent lifetime ban on Trump doing business in New York. So they're asking the court to have Trump stop doing something. Um, and those are the main differences. Criminal is government against a person or a business. Civil is an individual or a business against another individual or a business. Primarily, they're one of the most common responses you'll hear with anything having to do with the law is "it depends," because there are always exceptions to every rule, and there are a lot of rules. Uh, Civil cases, in more often than not, need to be proven by a preponderance of the evidence. So if you imagine a scale where they're even, a preponderance of the evidence is you put a feather on one side, and it's just, you know, it's also been characterized as 51%. But it's just this slight difference in, whichever side's favor. Some civil instances where where probate, conservatorships, restraining orders, those sorts of things, they need to be proven by clear and convincing evidence. So you look at that scale again, and it's a little bit more. It's in between preponderance and beyond a reasonable doubt. It's in the middle. Um, and the key differences between criminal and civil are the parties involved, whether it's the government or an individual that's bringing the suit, um, the nature of the offense or dispute, and the penalties or remedies. With a civil case, you're not going to go to jail. You're not going to be. There's no death penalty in a civil case, and the general process for civil cases, it starts out primarily. There are a lot of the same steps. They're different names, maybe different rules, but it's the same sort of process where criminal would have an indictment, civil has a complaint that's filed with the court. Um, and in civil, once you file the complaint, you then have to serve it. You can't just file a complaint and then go to the court without the person you're suing knowing that you're suing them. So you have to serve it upon them. And then that person has once they've been served, once they have that complaint, they'll have a set amount of time to file a response or file an answer. Some places, you could a hearing is scheduled by the court, like a case management hearing, and you can walk into court and just say, "I contest this," and that's good enough. A lot of other jurisdictions, you have to file something in writing that is usually called an answer, and that's where you respond to the paragraphs in the complaint, and then you can also add what's called affirmative defenses, and like the layman's terms is basically like, I I know that's what you said, but nuh-uh, and here's why. Um, and here's all and then you can file counterclaims, and counterclaims is, well, here's all the stuff you did. You're saying it's my fault. It's not my fault. It's your fault. So I'm suing you through counterclaims. Or you know what? It wasn't my fault. It was this person over here's fault. So I'm going to add a cross claim. And we're gonna add this person that's really responsible. So civil, because I love civil because it can go all over the place. Um, and then there's also, just like criminal, there's a discovery period. And that's just where you're either, requesting people to admit the facts that you've laid out in your complaint or the facts that you've laid out in your counterclaim. You're requesting documents. You have a series of questions that you're asking that you need responses to. Um, or you want a person that's involved with the case to actually come in for a deposition. And a deposition is sort of like trial testimony because it is under oath. And you're asked questions just like you would be in trial. And, you give your responses. The attorneys are allowed to object. It's all recorded by a transcriptionist. And whatever you say in that deposition, if you're asked the same questions in court, you better give the same answer, or else it can be used, against you. There are also, with civil, pretrial motions, and that can be anything from a motion for extension of time, a motion to amend the complaint, a motion to do anything. There are a lot of options when it comes to pretrial motions. It just depends on, there we go. It depends. It's the first time. Probably going to say that a lot more. It depends on what's filed, what they're claiming, and so there are just civil cases can go like this. They can branch out because there's so many different options and defenses and claims, and um but there's also uh, a motion for summary judgment, and a motion for summary judgment. It's, here's my claims that I've made in my complaint. Here are the defendant's responses. And yeah, we're going to go to trial, but we want to see what's actually in dispute. And so motion for summary judgment, the purpose of that is to streamline what's going to be heard at trial, and what points are going to be covered at trial. In the example of the New York business fraud case, a motion for summary judgment was filed. And that is basically the plaintiff saying, like, hey, we said this in our complaint. Here's everything that they said in the response. But you know what? We have so much documentation to prove our side that it's really not in dispute. We've got the our stuff is on point. We've got them dead to rights. So, judge, rule in our favor. Tell us, that you agree that we've got them beat on this. And, and it streamlines the process. And for all the complaining and all the brouhaha over the judge already ruled me guilty. No, there is no guilty in a civil case. So if you see someone somewhere saying, Trump was found guilty of rape, no, he wasn't. If you see Trump was found guilty of fraud, no, he wasn't. There is no guilt in a civil case. There is only guilt in a criminal case. And if it's not a criminal case, then there's no guilt. And that's a quick rule of thumb. A motion for summary judgment is always filed before trial because the purpose is to streamline the issues for trial. In some instances, your motion for summary judgment could prove every count of your complaint. And at that point, if a judge rules in your favor as to everything, well, then you're moving to the next step. You're entering judgment. You don't need to have a trial. And then there's also, it's called normally after the motion for summary judgment streamlines the issues for trial. Then the next thing that you would commonly find is it's called a motion in limine. It's 2 words, in, I-N, limine, L-I-M-I-N-E. And that type of motion, it streamlines the evidence that's going to be presented at trial. And both sides can file one. They can argue with what's going to be entered, what's not going to be entered, and why. Because you can't, a courtroom isn't a free for all. It's not going in there. It's not just going in there and just saying whatever you want to say, whenever you want to say it. There are court rules. There are rules of evidence, state rules of evidence, federal rules of evidence. There are procedures for criminal cases. And this is also at the state and the federal level. They each have their own set of rules. There are attorney ethical rules. There are rules on judicial conduct. There are rules on courtroom behavior, how you dress in a courtroom. Judges can have rules for their courtrooms. A perfect example is Judge Kaplan, who is currently hearing the E. Jean Carroll case. This is the website for the Southern District of New York. You can see that this is Louis A. Kaplan. That's the judge in the case. And then scrolling down, you see individual rules of practice. So these are the different things that he wants to see in his courtroom. And we can look at this. And it goes through there's 10 pages of crap. That this is what the judge wants for the cases that are before him. Judges are allowed to do this. This isn't a Democrat judge thing. It's not a Republican judge thing. It's not a conservative judge, a liberal judge. It's just the rules. And the rules are the rules. So it tells you how you are to communicate with the court, with the judge. It tells you how motions are going to be handled. And like this here, is just the initial like formatting of a motion. And then you go into like the different types of motions, like discovery disputes that this would refer mainly to like a motion to compel, where it's, hey, we asked for this, they gave us part, or they didn't give us anything, and now we want you to tell them that they have to give us what we're asking for. But it's the different types of motions, motion papers, requesting adjournments. So where, you know, Alina Habba was requesting an adjournment um, of the trial due to the death of Melania Trump's mother. Um, this tells you this is how, if you're going to make a request for an adjournment, this is how you have to do it. And, and here are where, when you're filing things, these are, that have to do with this judge. These are the rules for that. And pretrial rules. And exhibits. There was some brouhaha in the trial where Alina Habba didn't mark an exhibit, and it has right here, documents to be offered as exhibits shall be pre-marked, and they weren't. So, the judge calling her out on that isn't the judge being, anti-Trump. That is a rule. It wasn't followed. The judge has every right to call that person out and say, you need to do things the correct way. And so we can get off of that. What? There we go. You may also hear, especially with the appeals that are filed, you may hear the term en banc or en banc. Again, it's two words, E-N and then B-A-N-C. And that is French, which just means on the bench. So it is with appellate stuff, usually initially, there might be like one judge looking at it at your your request for appeal. There might be three judges looking at it, and they're primarily weeding through to see if they're going to take the case. And if they decide not to, you can then request a rehearing en banc, which means all of the appellate judges in that court. There was one, and I want to say it's the Court of Appeals DC district, that just denied a request for rehearing en banc that was filed by Trump's attorneys. And that is where all 11 or 12 judges reviewed everything and then said, no, we're not taking it. It was either DC or New York. You may hear ex parte. It's two words. First one is EX and then PARTE. And that just means really one side. Usually in communications with the judge or in the judge's chambers, it has to be both sides at the same time. Ex parte means that only one side is talking to the judge. And in Many instances, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to have ex parte communication with a judge. Um, One of the exceptions to that rule is the classified documents case in Florida. Um, that whole process, because it includes classified information, there are, and it's written right into the rules that there are ex parte hearings and communications with the judge. Um, and that, but then both parties are notified. Um, you may also hear sua sponte, 2 words. First one, SUA. The second one, SPONTE, sua sponte. And that is like Latin for of one's own accord. That you'll hear where a judge did something just on their own in the case. You'll hear like, oh, this judge sua sponte, because usually judges are, they're ruling on motions or they're ruling on objections. They're issuing, a case management order. They're issuing a pretrial order, just setting the standard deadlines and timeframes. You may hear it where, oh, the defense argued this and that was all they argued, but then the judge sua sponte brought up this other issue that now the plaintiff has to respond to. It's basically when the judge brings up something on their own. And um and judges, they're held to, they have rules. Some judges are more lenient, some are strict, and it is what it is. Judges are allowed to be sticklers. They're allowed to, like, I mean, as long as they're not abusive, they're allowed to tell an attorney to sit down. If an attorney is standing up when they shouldn't be standing up, the judge can say, sit down. You the judge can't say sit your ass down, but they can certainly tell you to sit down. If a defendant is being too loud in the courtroom, the judge can say, won't necessarily say it to the defendant, but they can certainly, they'll certainly say to the counsel, or the attorney, can you control your client? Can, please be quiet? Please lower your voice. Because, you know, I've seen a lot of things about like, oh, due process. Yes, Trump is entitled to due process. Everybody is. Every defendant everywhere is entitled to due process. But fairness of the court is for all parties. Just like a court proceeding can't tip the scales in favor of the prosecution, they can't tip the scales in favor of the defense. They have to be impartial. And just because in their personal lives a judge votes Democrat or independent or Republican, that's not an indication of how they're going to rule in court. Because a lot of times that information, like, you don't have that information on a defendant. A lot of the times, the J6 cases, criminal cases, that's different because if you were arrested as part of January 6th, most likely you're a Trump supporter. So, and most likely you're voting Republican. But that doesn't mean that the laws aren't going to be equally applied. So I wanted to just, do something real quick to kind of give out some extra info. So that when you're hearing about these things, when you're, or reading about them on social media or the newspaper or wherever, it'll make a little bit more sense. Or if you hear somebody saying like, "Oh, like they're trying to find Trump guilty of, some civil matter." Well, then you'll know that like, well, no, they're not. And it doesn't matter who they are. You will have that information. And, knowledge is power. And I'm a firm believer in gathering as much knowledge as possible, actual knowledge. This whole, and to be upfront, like when I do look at news and cable news, I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at MSNBC, CNN, Associated Press, PBS, Fox. I'm not a big OANN fan, uh, but I'll look at some Newsmax stuff. I'll look at Gateway Pundit and Daily Beast and just all the different, you know, just the different aspects and who's saying what where and what are they saying. Um, you know, and then if there's something that's mentioned in an article or a broadcast that that doesn't sound right. I go right to the source. Like, if it's, oh, this trial is this or this filing is this, well, I go and I pull up the filing and I look at it and I review it. And then I make up my own mind. The claims that the New York fraud case is election interference. No, it is not. Because that case was filed before Trump announced that he was running for president for 2024. You can't interfere in an election if you filed something against somebody that wasn't a candidate. And even the Georgia and the DC and Florida, you know, the investigation started before Trump announced. And just because he turned around and hurried up and announced before charges were filed, like that really didn't mean that anybody needed to stop. Because no one is above the law. And I would be saying the same thing if it was Biden or Obama or any Democrat. Case in point, Bob Menendez. Let's go. And he's somebody from my state. A Democrat from my state. Let's get on with it. I am all for the rule of law and having it applied equally. I don't care about somebody's who they vote, like who their political party is. And I'm not going to knock somebody for their political party. That's silly. And I'm too grown and I don't have time for that. If anyone watching, whether you're watching live or watching on the replay, if you have any questions about anything that I've covered or that you would like to see covered in the future, just add a comment to the video. I will see it and I will add it to the list. But other than that, I want to say thank you to all of the new subscribers that have jumped on. This past like couple weeks has just been I've been just thrilled. I am so excited that there are people, and I knew that there would be. I'm so excited that there are people that want to bridge the gap and just be that are just done with the division and the arguments and the name calling. Um, and that's what I hope to do with this channel is build a community where we remember that we're Americans first, and we all have the same core hope, which is to be able to take care of ourselves and the people that we love who depend on us. We all share the same fear, and that is, for some reason, something is going to come along and we aren't going to be able to do that. We aren't going to be able to take care of ourselves. We aren't going to be able to take care of our loved ones. Um, we all share those two things. No matter what your walk of life, your job, where you live, um, religious beliefs, orientation, any of it, we all have those two things in common at at the very core of who we are. Um, so I want to thank everybody for jumping on. Feel free to share with your friends. Um, let me know if you have questions, if there's anything that you want to see. And on that note, until next time.